At 1 o'clock in the morning, a broke bartender put his card into an ATM and tried to transfer $200 he did not have. The screen said the transaction had been cancelled. Then money appeared in his account anyway. He withdrew the cash, went back to the pub and bought another round. 4.5 months later, he had flown on private jets, paid other people's rent and university fees, lost his job, destroyed his relationship, and developed panic attacks while waiting for the police to kick down his door. His name was Dan Saunders, and once he discovered that his bank card could create money out of thin air, he could not make himself stop. In 2011, Dan was 29 years old and working behind a bar in Wangaratta, a small city northeast Victoria, Australia. He earned about $700 Australian dollars a week. He regularly had only a few dollars left in his account, and he had a gambling habit he still described as harmless fun. One night after finishing work, Dan stayed at the pub drinking with friends. When it was his turn to buy a round, he had no cash, so he walked to the ATM around the corner. He tried to move $200 from his credit card into the savings account. The machine rejected the transfer and returned his card. But when Dan checked the balance, the $200 was sitting there, so he withdrew it. But later that night, Dan passed the same ATM again. He tried another transfer, then $500, then $600. Every time the screen rejected the transaction, and every time the money appeared anyway. By the time he went home, he had pushed both cards as far as they would go. He woke up the next morning half convinced he had imagined everything. The cash beside him proved that he had not. Dan eventually worked out that the bank system were not fully synchronized during the late night processing window. A transfer could appear in one account before the system properly reconciled and reversed it. If he made a large transfer the next night, he could temporarily cover the previous shortfall and keep the illusion alive. He had not hacked the server or written a line of code. He had found a delay inside the bank and turned it into a machine that seemed to manufacture money. The first purchases were almost ordinary. He put some money into the account he shared with his girlfriend. He bought drinks for people at the bar. But the amounts grew quickly because the money did not feel earned and it did not feel limited. Dan later described the experience as discovering fire. With a few button presses, a bartender from a regional town could make his balance climb into the millions. People saw the balance and treated him differently. Dan sometimes claimed to work in investment banking or real estate. Most people did not investigate, they saw the money and accepted the story. Soon he was flying on private jets. He said one weekend flight to an island in Asia cost around $19,000. He ate at restaurants where a single bill exceeded what many people earned in a month. He paid friends university fees, covered rent, bought cars, and once he put a homeless man into a Hilton hotel simply because he could. That generosity made the whole thing easier to justify. Dan could tell himself he was not stealing for selfish reasons. He was helping people. He was beating a bank. He was giving everyone an experience they could never afford. But the lifestyle was not making his real life better. His gambling escalated. He began placing large bets while working behind the bar and eventually lost his job. His relationship ended too. Now the card was no longer a bonus inside an ordinary life. It was only the part of the life that still made him feel powerful. Dan was not addicted to the cash sitting in his wallet. He was addicted to what happened every time he used the card. The risk, the attention, the relief, and the feeling that normal limits no longer applied to him. The money removed every signal that normally tells a person to slow down. A bad bet, an expensive hotel, a private flight could all cover by another transfer, at least temporarily. Dan publicly said spree involved 1.6 million Australian dollars, and that is the number repeated in most versions of the story. Later reporting citing the bank's records put confirmed cash withdrawals at $353,786. Dan said the true amount was closer to $500,000, so the exact total is disputed. But even the lower documented figure was roughly 500 weeks of his old pay, close to 10 years of bartender wages, accessed in few months. The bank occasionally called to confirm the unusual transactions were really his. Dan said yes, the bank apologized for disturbing him, and the spending continued. But inside his head, the consequences had already arrived. He began having nightmares about armed police surrounding his hotel room. Every knock at the door felt like the end. During one panic attack in Sydney hotel, a passing doctor stopped to check whether he was okay. He was taking medication to get through days. The longer the police failed to appear, the worse the fear became. Eventually, Dan faced a choice. He could try to move the money overseas and disappear, or he could stop and return to being a person he had been before the glitch. He could not abandon his mother, his family, and his friends, so he stopped making the transfer. He contacted the bank and tried to surrender. At one point, he said he had about $80,000 in a hotel laundry bag ready to hand back. Then almost nothing happened. For years, Dan waited for the police. He could not move forward because he never knew when the story would catch up with him. So he did something almost as strange as exploiting the glitch in the first place. He went to the media and publicly explained what he had done. After several newspaper stories and national television interview, the authorities finally acted. Dan was arrested and charged with more than 100 counts of fraud and theft. In 2015, he was sentenced to 1 year in jail and faced a financial penalty of roughly $250,000. The consequence he had been waiting for finally arrived. In a strange way, it also brought a relief. There was no longer anything to hide. Years later, Dan said the process mattered more to him than the money. The strongest high came from using the glitch itself. He now speaks about gambling problems and early warning signs. His deepest regret is that his mother had to visit him in jail. Dan's story is easy to reduce to a fantasy. What would you buy if an ATM gave you unlimited money? But that is not the real question. The real question is what would happen after 100th withdrawal, when spending no longer hurts and every bad decision can be covered with another transfer. Financial disasters rarely begin with the final number. They begin with one small decision that appeared to have no immediate consequence. For Dan, it was $200 for a round of drinks. Then every withdrawal made the next one easier. Every night without police made the risk feel less real, and every person who enjoyed the money helped make the life feel normal. There is no truly free money. If you do not pay for it with work, patience, or risk you understand, the bill usually arrives somewhere else through debt, fear, lost relationships, or lost time. Dan found a glitch that could create money. What he could not create was a version of himself that could live with it. The ATM error lasted a few months. The more dangerous glitch was the one in his thinking. If the consequences do not arrive today, maybe they never will. They did, and that is why he could not stop. Until stopping had already cost him almost everything.